Hey everybody, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. I am Thanksgiving traveling, which is why it maybe sounds a little bit different in here. I'm at my in-laws' place, and I know in-law jokes, like you're supposed to say some stuff right there, and we're all supposed to roll our eyes, but mine are great. This is genuinely very likable people, and I'm super thankful to them for all the things that they did to nurture and develop my wife into the amazing lady that she is, so that I could have an amazing family with her. And so as I'm recording this, it is Thanksgiving time, and I find myself being very, very thankful for those blessings in my life. And I'm very thankful that you and I get to hang out and talk about the Bible, and that I don't have to feel enormous pressure to know every single thing about all the things, because there's just a lot of things to know, and it's way more fun and satisfying to sort it through with you, to work through it with you, to learn on the fly with you. And one of the places where I've had to do that is in a conversation we've had a couple of times here over the last few weeks, which is figuring out who on earth all these women are at the crucifixion and, hint, hint, what's about to happen, the resurrection of Jesus, because they're held out by Matthew as being the faithful witnesses. Remember the bookend thing where on either side of the crucifixion, you get two sets of witnesses. Two of those witnesses are real crappy witnesses. They'll just say whatever they're supposed to say to get the conviction that they want. Who cares about truth? But then on the other end, we get Gentile witnesses, that being the centurion and the other people who put Jesus to death. And we get these faithful women, outsiders, but that's what a good, faithful, loyal witness looks like. And the more I have gone and dug into the different comparative accounts, especially of the last part of Jesus' ministry, Jesus' life, the more I realize just how many of these ladies there were. Now, we've talked a whole bunch about the Marys, and that's going to come up again here in just a minute. Mary, mother of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, then a couple other Marys who might be the same Mary or maybe are all different Marys. But on top of that, you also have James and John's mom hanging out there, and apparently a bunch of other women as well who are just in a position where they're like, hey, I'm throwing my reputation, I'm throwing my money and my energy at this guy. He is the champion of outsiders. As moms, we know what it looks like to make a family, and this guy is building a new family of faith. And so they're all in ways that I don't think we totally understand because of the distance in historical context. I don't think we get how much it meant for a woman to drop what they were doing and follow Jesus. We always fixate on some men, they were fishing and they had nets and they dropped the nets and they followed Jesus. That is awesome. But I think these ladies are a little bit underappreciated. That said, the amount of references we're getting to women to a first century Jewish, Roman, Eastern Mediterranean audience is kind of bonkers, because that wouldn't score you a ton of social points. And yet Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, all of them are keen to point out these faithful, loyal women. And at the beginning of Matthew chapter 28, our final chapter in the book of Matthew, we get another reference to these ladies. Matthew 28:1. After the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. They are not backing down. They are absolutely insistent that they are going to stay present through this thing. The reality is that usually dying puts a damper on things. It's kind of a wet blanket to most movements. It sort of slows down the momentum in terms of people's enthusiasm for a thing. And you kind of quit believing that somebody's going to be able to come through after they die because of how they're no longer participating in the game. They have become inanimate where they were once animate. But these ladies, out of a few possible motivations that we'll consider here, keep showing up. They're not over it. They're not done. Now, what might those motivations be? Okay, well, we get the impression that some of the ladies were concerned that somebody was going to come and steal the body of Jesus. Maybe they were concerned that someone who misunderstood Jesus was going to do that. Maybe they were concerned that a well-meaning follower of Jesus was going to come and try to steal the body to make a point, a similar concern in that case to what the Pharisees had. Maybe they were concerned that the Pharisees were going to try to steal the body so that they could false flag the situation, and then once everybody got excited, make a mockery of it all by presenting Jesus' body once again. I don't know, maybe that's pretty far-fetched, but I had fun imagining it. Whatever the case, they think, apparently, this circle of women, that the body and indeed the dignity of the burial of Jesus is somehow in jeopardy. But I don't think that's the only reason they're milling around here. I think they're still putting their name and their reputation on the line because they still think he's coming back to life. Now, I couldn't begrudge them if they don't have perfect 100% certainty about this. Is kind of uncharted territory. Who knows exactly how this works? Does it work? Maybe they're in a place where they're he raised other people back to life. You had that widow's son in that little village called Nain. You had that little girl back in, I always get these two confused. Chapter 8? No, that's the beginning of chapter 9, right? Whatever, it's chapter 8 or chapter 9. And then most recently, in the town outside of Jerusalem that Jesus would last visit, that being Bethany, near there, Lazarus had been raised back to life. Now, how many of these Marys, how many of these women who were following him around were people whose lives had been touched by loss? My guess, first century, all of them, most of them, at least. And come on, if you've taken a loss in your life, you know what that does to you. You know where your head goes. You know, if you've lost somebody you really love, somebody really close to you, you know the things that you sit around and think about, the not even improbable, the absurd scenarios that you play out in your brain about somehow getting them back, somehow seeing them again. These ladies had allowed their brains to go where I'm sure everybody's brain goes when they experience loss. But they had seen that absent-minded daydream, that grief processing thing, at least in a few circumstances, play out as reality. People who were dead, no longer dead, as though Jesus were trying to signal to them repeatedly that even death cannot thwart the power of God, thwart the establishment of this kingdom. But again, it's a little different when Jesus is there. He's raised somebody back to life once or twice. He's broken the laws of time and space repeatedly, and he's alive. But surely they couldn't help but wonder, what are the ground rules now that he's dead? Who does the resurrecting? Who does the healing? So my guess would be that on the one hand, these women are there because they're wary of other people trying to pull stunts, and they just want to be right on top of the chain of custody of the body because they are presented by Matthew as being faithful, effective, reliable witnesses. That means they're going to want to keep eyes on the thing the whole time. Maybe there's been a rotation of eyes on this whole affair the entire time. And these women just took it upon themselves to be like, nobody else is here. We're going to do it. We're going to watch this whole thing like hawks and see what goes down. But I think the bigger motivation is, even if they don't know what the mechanics of it are going to look like or how physically this thing is going to actually manifest in front of your eyes, they still think this isn't over. They still think Jesus is coming back to life. And so, you said 3 days. How do you count 3 days? Well, we'll talk about that soon too, but they're going to be there for it. So my guess would be these faithful, reliable witness women, either as a group or maybe in a rotation, have had eyes on this. They've been covering this the whole time. My guess is also that this is a peak time, dawn on the third day, and maybe your brain goes to Gandalf showing up at Helm's Deep or some other military exploit, and the winged hussars or whatever heroic delivering force arrives to deliver at dawn on the third day. And so maybe Mary Magdalene specifically called this time slot and was like, I'm getting this one in the rotation because I think this is when it's going to happen. Now, how did we get to this third day thing? Well, you'll recall twice in the book of Matthew, Jesus has referenced upon the Pharisees demanding of him a sign. He's referenced that the only sign they're going to get is the sign of Jonah. And then he goes on to say that in the same way that Jonah spent 3 days in the belly of that fish, so the Son of Man will spend 3 days in the belly of the earth. Jesus has also alluded to his own death, indicating that there would be a turnaround that would look like this. You'll recall the accusation of the witnesses that Jesus apparently had said that he would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. So everybody's looking at that number, real curious, holding their breath. Of course, everyone is strategically, out of no doubt self-preservation motives, holding their breath and watching from a great distance, except Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, who've put their neck on the line for this, and these women who are putting their necks on the line for this all the time, and who just simply refuse to go away and quit watching. Now, you and I have talked about the Roman division of time, how the different hours work, dividing that into 4-hour chunks, and how there's a little bit of ambiguity in terms of how you would count time. You'll recall there's some debate about like, oh, well, do the timelines of the crucifixion day, do they all work between the different accounts? And my feeling is, well, yeah, they work. And I suppose tomorrow we'll break down a little more carefully why I think Mary Magdalene and the other Mary are so keen to be there right at this moment, because I think they've done the math and they're like, all right, if he said 3 days, this would be how you would count 3 days. But I don't want to detract from what the larger point is for today. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary and all these other women who aren't here right at this second, but they've been keenly interested in what's going on, their faithfulness is set to be rewarded. Their faith is about to become sight. The text here says they went to look at the tomb. Usually you go look at a tomb, you muse at a gravestone of somebody you've lost. There's not a lot of action there, but you get the impression from the rest of the text that they anticipated something might yet be cooking here. And indeed, in the very next passage, we're going to see Matthew pull the bookend trick again, this time with a violent earthquake. That happens right at the crucifixion as Jesus dies. And now, as Jesus is resurrected to life, we get that same thing happening again. We're going to break down all of this stuff, way more tomorrow. I can't wait to unpack what's next with you tomorrow. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.